to talk about Cisco. Hello, and thank you very much for joining us today to talk about Cisco Threat Response, our integration tool for incident response and investigation that I'm sure you've heard about lately. My name is Ben Greenbaum. I'm a TME on the Advanced Threat Solutions team, and I'm going to be joined by Nassif Edras, a TME for Cisco Threat Response as well. We're going to talk about a few things today. We're going to cover who the tool is for, what is the value of Cisco Threat Response. We're going to talk about some customer feedback, and then we're going to get into technical details and some roadmap and close up with where you can get some additional information. So let's talk first, as is highlighted, about who this tool is for. And the answer is anybody that does security, because the way the tool is designed, it simplifies complex operations, and there's nobody who can't benefit from that. So for our small security operations team that's got limited staff, limited SIM, no SOAR deployed, no plans to do so, what we'll do for them is speed up their detection, investigation, and remediation processes, giving them the ability to do more with what they've already got. For our robust and mature security teams customers who have their own SOC full of dedicated full-time employees, they have a SIM, they either have a SOAR or they have one in progress, what we do is reduce the burden on those additional tools and reduce the requirements. As you're probably aware, Threat Response comes at no additional charge with purchase of qualifying products. And therefore, it's a way that we are giving to our customers for them to use their existing Cisco security investments and to some extent third-party security investments more effectively together. And what does it actually help them do? We've talked about how it will decrease their mean time to response and it will lessen the burden on their other tools, but how does it do that? And the answer boils down to the fact that an integrated security portfolio is, in a way, its own value for customers. Everyone's going to be familiar with how this part works. We've got Talos underpinning all of our best-of-breed security portfolio products, and we've got the management layer above, all driven by open APIs and open developer environments and these tools providing services over those APIs that allow us to coordinate across different products for detection, investigation, and remediation, and then allow us to set policy from those unified management tools back into the portfolio products. And of course, we've got third-party integrations on the side. We have an entire very talented team here at Cisco that works on doing security integrations, and Threat Response gives them a way to offer to the broader security community additional integration points. Cisco Threat Response is the front end of all of that. It's the key pillar of that integrated architecture. We've been talking the integrated architecture for the entirety of the 2 years that I've been with Cisco, and Threat Response is us actually writing that story down and making it real for our users. It automates and orchestrates across multiple security products, and it focuses on the SOC. We've got a push to enable the SOC, to accelerate the SOC, and this is where this really happens, because the SOC will use this as a window, as a gateway into all of the other tools that we're offering them, again, for detection, investigation, and remediation. And like I said, it's included as part of our existing security product licenses. Nobody has to pay extra to get Threat Response. If they've got AMP, if they've got ThreatGrid, if they've got Umbrella, soon to come if they've got other integrated products, they get access to Cisco Threat Response thrown in. So integrated security is a priority for our customers. There's a whole industry that has sprung up around this market requirement. Security operations centers have questions like, here's the thing I found out about, is it bad and why, and has it affected us and how? And they've got all these systems on the right, more than that actually, across which they need to check to get answers to those questions. Each one at a time, often for each indicator one at a time, and that's where we come in. Right now, there is integration and there is automation available in the market. Like I said, there's a whole industry come up around this. Individual tools have made API hooks and other capabilities to be able to insert middleware in between things. The diagram is just to show that this is complex. You've got all these tools talking to each other in kind of a spider web lattice design. No real management of how they do so. The process is, as it says, difficult, time-consuming, and error-prone. We have to try to monitor all of these different technologies, some of which may be integrated with each other, one-to-one here, one-to-two there. We're trying to integrate all of this into a SIM to solve this problem, but even that comes with its own complexities and its own issues, because these are all from different vendors, And of course, you update a version of one package, and it affects how that package integrates with all the other architecture that you've built around it. You have to manually correlate threats, threat intelligence. Even with the SIEM that brings all your incidents together, you often still have to manually correlate intelligence with the local context information in that SIEM. You've got threat intelligence coming in from multiple different locations, and you've got siloed information inside the organization. The email team might not be, the email security team might not be fully integrated with the firewall security team, who barely ever talks to the endpoint security team, and so on. Nobody has all this information in one place. And your remediation is, as I've said, across multiple inconsistent consoles as well. This is what this looks like. Here's our SecOps guy. He's got a lot of work to do, and he's got this thing that just came in. It's a file that maybe came in from an advisory, a file hash that he's been told is bad. It may be an internal alert on a domain that was contacted that seems suspicious for some reason. And those questions pop up again because they're always going to be the same. Is this thing actually bad, and why? And has it affected us, and how? And so to answer those questions, we've got a couple of different kinds of tools. He'll pose the question first to threat intelligence: is this known to be bad, and why? And get back a response. Oh, yeah, this looks bad. Okay. The problem, of course, is that he'll have multiple threat intelligence sources, and he has to check each one of those individually, and like I said, often one indicator at a time. If this is a list of 35 malicious hashes, and he's got those 6 threat intelligence sources, we'll do the math. This is a lot of queries. Then he's going to check internal monitoring to say, have we seen this in our network? Has this file has popped up in our firewall, in our mail security gateway, in our web security gateway, on the endpoint, anywhere else that I've got? And again, possibly checking for each one of those file hashes individually. So finally, he's brought all of this information together and can derive a policy that should mitigate this threat. And he puts it into the organization's one unified policy and enforcement tool. And of course, that's not true, because we have all of these different control planes at all these different points around the network. This is how people work today. I can't believe I'm saying this at this point in history, but today this is still how most security is done. This is how the operation looks with Cisco Threat Response. Do you know about this file hash? Cisco Threat Response then contacts all of these points of information over their APIs. And this is the magic of Cisco Threat Response, is that we use all these APIs so that you don't have to use their user interfaces. All these responses come back, Threat Response collects them all, puts them into this pretty picture that you see on your screen that is much more intuitive than going through spreadsheets or notepads or even incident notebooks full of all of these disparate details. And then, once a policy is drafted that's going to help mitigate this problem or protect against it, that can also be enacted, or at least the first stages of it can easily be enacted through Cisco Threat Response over the APIs of our control products. 2 operations: global intelligence, local insight, and local remediation, all handled via 2 operations. So somebody will walk into your office if you're working in a SOC, or they'll walk into the SOC and say, hey, this is a new banking Trojan I just read about. I need to know right now, are we impacted by this? And your guy in the SOC is sitting there saying, well, I guess I'll find out. And there's this whole hunting workflow that happens as a result of that. The user learns about a threat from an intelligence source and wants to see if the threat exists in your environment. I already walked you through what typically has to happen now. But what Threat Response does is remove most of that process and replace it with a single lookup. Threat Response, what do you know about this IP hash, whatever it is? Have we seen it? Which endpoints saw it? At what points in our network was this detected, and what was happening around that at the time? What's the context? Threat Response will automatically use the APIs to query our Cisco products and, in some cases, third-party products, more to come in future, to enrich this investigation. Reach out to everything and gather back all of the responses into this single unified workbench. And then once that's done, you can also still, of course, pivot back out to all these individual sources for more information. In the slide right now, you see, AMP for endpoints. You can get the entire file trajectory and see what process, launched the process that then dropped this file, which then dropped another file. You can search for the hash directly in AMP for endpoints. You can add it and remove it to your custom detections list, and there's the response capabilities that I was talking about. Below that, at the bottom of the pop-up menu, you see Umbrella. You can go through to Umbrella and see what Umbrella knows about this sample. In the case of a domain, you can also pop through to Umbrella and see the entire domain registration history, because we're not trying to replicate all of the functionality and the entire user interface of every product in threat response. Okay, threat response is never going to replace all of FMC. I will guarantee you that now and bet you any sum of money you can think of. We are never going to do that. But what we are doing is bringing together the most common and the most time-sensitive research and response capabilities of all of these products into one location, but still allowing you the ability to easily, with a single click, pivot out to the more detailed information available in some of the integrated products. So once we started beta on this in late 2017, so it's been out for just over a year now, to some degree of availability or another. And we've gotten a lot of feedback. I am at the Cisco Lives and Black Hats and everything all the time telling people about threat response and having these conversations with customers. We've gotten a lot of feedback from customers. We currently have 3,100 or more than 3,100 companies, customer organizations, not individual users, but organizations, using Cisco Threat Response, and their response has been very positive. They are able to easily see infections on the network in a visually intuitive fashion. That it greatly simplifies the visibility. In fact, the tool used to be called Visibility, if you might remember that. Threat Response greatly simplifies security analysis because of this enhanced and simplified visibility. We also run threat hunting workshops. And this has been a very successful way to demonstrate Cisco Threat Response to people and to show them, to get them hands-on, sleeves rolled up, elbows deep into threat response, and really showing them the value proposition of this connected and integrated tool set. In just the last quarter of last year, fiscal year, we ran 165 of these, and we get great response from this. So Cisco Threat Response is, in some regards, a sales tool that customers are begging to use because obviously it has that value. It greatly simplifies their workflows, but then they begin to see what the system could do if they could just add, this umbrella module, if they could just add a threat grid module, and it makes them want to buy the other products. The threat hunting workshops is what introduces them in many cases to threat response and shows them what the tool can do, and we give it to them loaded up with all the modules, and they can see all the functionality available because of those different modules. So an excellent starting point, very, very high success rate with generating customer interest. And so now we're going to talk about the technical details and the upcoming roadmap. I am going to stop sharing my screen at this point and pass the ball to Nassif. And while I do that, we're going to have a look through the Q&A window there. I hope you're using the Q&A window. Okay, Nassif, you have got the ball, and I turn it over to you. Nassif is a TME partner on Cisco Threat Response and is going to walk you through all of the interesting technology at play and show you a bit of a demo.
Thanks, Ben. Can you see my screen?
Yes. We can see PowerPoint, not the presenter mode, but just PowerPoint.
Okay. Let me just move this over here. Let me go to presenter mode. Let me know when you can see presenter mode.
Yes.
Okay.
Got it.
So I'm going to highlight the building blocks that makes these elements work together. So you can have product context, and that's endpoint, network traffic, internet requests, web activity, email messages. Right now, we've got endpoint integrated. We've got the ability to correlate who inside your organization did a certain DNS lookup for a known domain that we want to investigate. And we've also got the capability to search through email. Next up, we're looking at adding the ability to search through those web logs from the WSA, and we're going to use that with the message tracking APIs. That's on the detection side. When we try to figure out how to investigate that, we have to add additional context. And we can either add an intelligence context, or we can add an identity context on the investigation side. This is where we are in conversations now with the teams. How can we bring identity into the situation, because we've got the intelligence side there. So that identity may come from Duo, may come from ICE. All these things are in conversation right now to figure out what to do. And then on the far end, at the remediation side, there's going to be this affecting the policy in a cohesive manner. Can we affect the policy in one place? And lots of you have been asking us about what will threat response integrate like with CDO or all those things. Everything right now, TBD, to be decided as to what makes the most sense. If we need to affect a block across IP space, do we follow something like an extrapolated syntax that if threat response gives the command block, we figure out what block means to an ASA, what block means to a firepower threat defense device, what block means to Meraki, what block means to a Viptela SD-WAN, but to the operator, they just have to know block. So that's kind of what I want to set up for you in terms of the work that we'll be doing over the next year to figure out how to get from a detection to remediation with speed. This is just the background here. I included the slide so you can understand that we've got Talos permeating across the portfolio from the left-hand side, flowing all the way across. And our goal is here, can we aggregate and unify these detections to get to the investigation side to figure out how to remediate? Essentially the OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, and act what to do next. That's the part where we're trying to reduce that investigation time. You folks also know that Palo Alto just bought or announced intent to acquire a security automator. They're trying to do this from a playbook standpoint. What we have done here on the Cisco threat response side is we've tried to make it as easy as possible for customers so that they don't have to go and build playbooks. They don't have to figure out how to do apps. And to get to the third-party ecosystem, we've made our APIs available so that burden does not run on us to figure out how to go do the automated enrichment. If we've got good partners or the customers have that skill set as to how to go run their workflows, they will simply use our APIs to go make that happen. And then finally, this is the remediation. Big thing that you folks are asking for, the ability to be able to quarantine a host. Can you change the authorization of that host on the network? Don't take it offline. Or can we insert additional actions? Right now, as threat response lives, 2 remediation actions that are available. Block file hash and block domain. We want to get to the state where we can use the NGFW estate, that portfolio that our customers have invested in, so that we can effect a block IP action, even perhaps a block URL action using the security intelligence list that NGFW already has. So we're looking at doing all that, and then Martin Nystrom is going to figure out with Aaron Woland how to bring the SD-WAN side in the picture to be able to expand that footprint as to be able to do a remediation. This is where the roadmap is right now. Right now, we've just released the Firefox browser plugin. By May 2019 this year, we are probably going to be releasing Incident Manager. And the way the Incident Manager works, I'll probably go into much more detail into that mechanics much later on. But essentially, it's your IPS alerts will go to the cloud eventing service, which is a new concept that our customers will be introduced to. We'll be publishing notable events as incidents to Threat Response Incident Manager. The idea there is, can we use the rest of the Cisco portfolio to investigate a notable IPS alert? The next question that normally comes there, and I'm going to preempt that, is, well, we want to be able to look at malware events. We want to be able to look at all those security intelligence events that comes from that portfolio. We have that on our roadmap. The first integration out the gate is to consume the IPS alerts from the customer's NGFW portfolio. Then the next thing that we're looking at, aiming for first half calendar year 2019, if we can get there, is to bring AMP alerts and Stealth Watch alerts into Incident Manager. Same thing. Can you use the risk of the Cisco portfolio to investigate those alerts? And then we want to get the enrichment in reverse. Right now, we are not able to go back to the NGFW to ask for the connection events that may be related to a flow of traffic. We are not able to do that for NetFlow. We want to be able to enrich that and get some flow data as an enrichment module or connection events as an enrichment module and back to an investigator. And then as well for the SMA, as we do with the email appliance, can we activate the SMA's web tracking API so we can try to figure out things such as browser user agents, low prevalence of those, probably something fishy that needs an investigation. So we're looking at all those things. Additional information, threat response available in 3 geos. That's the North American one that we put up there on the screen. Visibility.eu for EU, visibility.apjc for that APJC region. There's the Chrome extension, there's the Firefox extension. On the note of the SMA integration for regions outside of North America, the SMA will only be supported when we've got a SSE, the Security Services Exchange deployment in that region. So when we get out of beta on the email integration, we will only support North America right now. If we get out of beta in the next week or two, by May this year, we will instantiate the EU region, and the EU customers will be able to cross-launch and add their SMA into the EU instance. Ben, is there anything you wanted to speak on here?
Sure. Thanks, Nasser. Additionally to the resources prior, we've got some videos that are available. Configuration video, which I'm currently working on updating at cs.co/getthreatresponse. The threat response demo at cs.co/tourctr. The threat response complete YouTube playlist at cs.co/ctr videos, and the Cisco Security How-To video series at the shortcut shown. We put these videos up on YouTube so that they're easy for you to refer customers to. Feel free to watch them yourselves and send them to customers and potential customers, anyone who has questions about Cisco Threat Response. And these videos show how to use it, both how to configure it and how to use it in common SOC applications. Thanks, Nasser.
Thank you. So I'm going to do a demo now as to how we demo this with customers, with analysts, and to unleash the Cisco APIs on that. So as Ben set this up in at the start of this conversation, one of the questions that we have is, are we impacted by something? And we normally go to the latest Talos blog intelligence, and when Talos publishes their blog, they give you the indicators of compromise. We'll cover what these indicators of compromise mean in the aspect of threat response after I do the demo. But the ability for us to be able to save time inside the SOC by simply highlighting whatever is on the screen represented inside the Chrome or Firefox browser, and then immediately getting real-time disposition of what's happening right here. Now, to the Cisco customers, if you've got appropriate policies configured in this particular example here, if your policies were configured well and nothing's in audit mode and you're not monitoring, what you know immediately out of this entire environment, there's 25 things that you're already covered by. Why? Because our threat intel, Talos, AMP Global Intel, as well as we've got the VirusAural module, we have a disposition on these hashes that if we saw these things, we would have already blocked it. So what's important to that security operator now becomes those 5 unknowns. Tell me exactly how I'm impacted by these 5 unknown elements. And so we have the ability simply with the browser is highlight those 5 unknowns, whatever was extracted out of there, and click investigate. Consider this to be the Google question you're asking of your infrastructure. Tell me, what do we know about this? Can we search across this? And the first thing we detect is that, yes, we do have an endpoint that has triggered on one of these observables. As we need to find out what it is, the graph then renders directly to this endpoint to tell you that this endpoint has indeed communicated with one of the IP observables that you have. And these IP addresses are now summarized up here. Here's where the speed comes in from. The next question that the SOC is going to have is, how did this get in the environment? What is it? All we know, it's an unknown. It's not clean, not suspicious, not malicious. I want to get more information about this. Now, bear in mind, Cisco Threat Response does not hold any data. So when we add this to investigation, we are going to make an API call to the module that holds that. And in this case, it's AMP4 endpoint module. And we're asking AMP4 endpoints, give us more information about this. Can we get more information? In addition, because it's a file hash, we also have the SMA module that we can go to. And notice what happened within a few seconds. We went from one target that's been identified in terms of knowing that there is a positive match on a PC to 7 targets being shown within a few seconds. What we're able to read here is this particular file hash that we have searched for. We have seen it come across a network gateway. In this case, it's because our FMC is strapped to our AMP instance. We also see that there were 2 email addresses that were targeted with that file. So that file was seen inside 2 email messages. The email security appliance involved with the transport of that particular email message, we highlight that for you. And we went from one endpoint to 2 other endpoints. There's a Windows server and there's another Windows server over there. So this is the speed that we're speaking about, that we're able to help with the SOC. Now, if you did this with a Phantom or a Demisto, you would have to write an extensive playbook, if this, then that, or else. And then even in that case, you'd have to bring the human onto the loop in the appropriate time. The next evolution that we're looking for this is, wouldn't it surely be nice if we can have these things auto-run and then bring the human onto the loop when it's time to investigate further. So these are the things that we've done. We can figure out the file name. So you saw the file name is tax returns, but what does this help you? And what does this mean to a particular customer? To a customer, as we build out this particular investigation, we're now able to figure out that the environment is tax related. It's tax season. Tax software package is the email subject. Tax return form filler is the email subject. And if it was spread out to 5 or 6 email addresses, one of them has been actually weak enough to click on it. So there's an education opportunity. For the SOC to have done this without threat response integrating with the email clients, that would take probably a few hours, because the analyst would then have to go to the email admins to ask these same questions. We have now gone from a suspicious IP, a hypothesis, am I affected, how am I affected, to getting the details of what the campaign is associated with this particular threat in the environment. And then you also have the ability, as I indicated, you have the ability to issue a block for this file hash directly from the system, as well for a domain that you deem necessary. All of this is powered through APIs. If you need to save anything here right now to be able to back up your action, the ability to take a snapshot, this is stored inside the appropriate cloud. If you're in EU, your snapshot will remain inside EU and things like that. But this is important because you've got the evidence now that you can use in your case notes as to why you made an action or why you issued a block. And if the disposition of any of these elements changes over time, this snapshot is a frozen in time artifact that at this moment in time, this was the disposition for those elements, and you can save that. What made this work is this API client that we have released, and this is the thing that we've made open. You have the ability to access casebooks, create casebooks, use the enrichment, inspection, put in your own verdicts into your own threat repository. That's your private intelligence. And then if you do want to give certain teams the response action, they can get the response action directly from the browser. Plugin if they use that. But if they're not using the browser plugin and they're writing their own code, if their API client has a response action, they can issue blocks on domains, blocks on file hashes simply from their code based on the credentials that they've used inside their coding. Right. Let me show you how the SMA integration works. Most of you will probably not be able to see this manage devices. You probably have a message inside your threat response console. Please contact the beta manager. We've hidden this behind the beta flag right now because this cross launches to the Cisco Services Exchange. And I'll walk you through that particular setup here because I think it's important that you know what's going to happen once we get out of beta. The ability to cross-launch and manage devices, when you do that, you are now going to enter this new realm that most customers have never seen. It's going to be called the Cisco Services Exchange. And inside the Cisco Service Exchange, this tenant name is derived from your AMP tenant or from your ThreatGrid tenant or from your Cisco Security Account tenant. The first thing you will do once you get here is you will have to explicitly say, I want to enable Cisco Threat Response Integration or CDO or the eventing service. By doing this, we are saying the customer, we're giving the customer the power, although it's my Cisco Service Exchange, I'm not going to allow Cisco Threat Response just to get in here directly until I have explicitly allowed that to happen. So once they enable that, your customer will then generate a token. And these tokens are considered them to be time sensitive, and you can generate up to 100 of them. But once you create these tokens, this is the link that is going to hook up your Cisco Security Services Exchange connector, SSE connector, which is built into the SMA first, and we'll use this token to register it. And I'll just jump to the SMA to show you where that is inside the latest code. So inside the 12.0 GA release of the SMA, you're going to have cloud service settings. This cloud service settings is going to have the option to enable threat response. When you do enable threat response, it's going to ask you to provide a token. That's the token that you just created. Once that token goes live, let me just go back to where that was. Once that token goes live, your system will then show that it's registered and it will be recognizable. At that point, you can now continue and work and use the SMA in the course of investigation. Once the SMA is registered, you will then come here and add the SMA as an integration module, add new module. You folks have seen the AMP for Endpoints module, Umbrella module. SMA email is the new module, and it just recognizes the device that is currently registered. You'll call upon the SMA, nothing else further to do. And by doing so, you're able to answer a certain amount of questions as to what the threats are regarding email vectors, who has targeted my organization, which users have they targeted, have I seen any file name inside email, so on and so forth. Ben, you want to jump into the TDM now?
Sure. Thank you very much, Nassif. Very informative and forward-looking demo. Excellent stuff as always. I see that we've got a couple of questions that have showed up and been answered in the QA channel. If anybody else has questions, please do feel free to put them in the channel. We've got a very talented team standing by ready to answer those questions for you.
Okay, so I'm going to answer some questions here just by looking at the questions here, Ben. Let me see. Georgi asks, how can we integrate NGFW FTD into CTR? Georgi, I think I will actually show you guys that in a moment. Paul Jones, how do we get the beta flag removed? In your own threat response instance, if you are in a US threat response instance, just send your current login to Robert Peterson and ask him if you can have the beta flag removed from your threat response instance. That's to Paul Jones. When do we expect SMA integration to be delivered or GA? Ben, do you have the updates as to when we think we were going to do that?
We do not have that information yet at this time.
Okay. The GA code for the SMA and the ESA, I think, just went out on Monday or Friday. So we are still tuning. We got some good beta feedback, and we're looking to make that those enhancements and bring that out there. Okay. So I'm going to cover, Ben, I think there's enough interest around how the firepower stuff will work. So I'm going to cover that as well, okay?
Okay, sure. Yeah, let's modify this on the fly. Absolutely. There is a lot of interest around this. Please do.
Okay. Okay, so let's start with firepower stuff. This is specifically for your Georgi, so let's do this. So there's two versions, and I'm just going to speak as we go along here. 6.3 does not have the SSE connector built into it. So in 6.3, a customer will acquire an ISO image called the CSSP, a Cisco Security Services Proxy. And essentially that is a portable SSE connector that they will deploy on-premise. Inside the 6.3 code, specifically, the feature that we're looking at to be able to send those alerts to the CSSP, which is the on-premise SSE connector that's not built into 6.3. 6.4, they won't have to do this particular step. But let me load this policy up here. While that policy is loading, let me get the back end ready here. Again, cloud services, and you're going to have to be able to also put in some environment consideration. If you've got port scanners on the network and they're triggering a lot of IPS alerts, you'll have the ability to filter them from the environment. If you've got certain subnets that you do want to highlight and make a, don't ignore things that are at these subnets or these IPs, you can add them in there. So you've got that type of tuning capability. Let's see if this guy came back. Okay, so still loading the policy. Once that policy loads, the Firepower FTD image has the ability to send IPS alerts over syslog. That Cisco Security Services Proxy, CSSP, that I referenced, will become a syslog destination in addition to anything else that you may have configured. But when it does that, it allows the CSSP to ingest this particular IPS alert and then publish it into the Cisco Services Exchange. So at the Service Exchange, your customers, we are giving a rudimentary event viewer just so that they can see the threat scores of the IPs involved in their logs and alerts. In this case, you're going to see I'm holding about 537,000 events. We are going to cap that at 1 million events. So what does that mean to you and your customers? If you've got a busy environment and you're doing 1 million events per day, you will have a day's worth of data that will be stored for you to go look at. Most customers, we don't expect them to be ever looking at this because the significance of this is that there's a curation that happens inside the Service Exchange that poor reputation IPs will be published as events into Cisco Threat Response. Let me see if this thing came up here. Still coming up. I've got an unnatural IPS policy. I've got 36,000 rules enabled just so we could put some load on the Service Exchange and start scaling that testing out. But hopefully that answers your question as to how that integration will work. For Firepower 6.3, you will need this particular piece of code in the form of an ISO. Ben and I have compiled all the documentation that needs to go with that. and we have to coordinate the release of that documentation across multiple teams: Threat Response, NGFW, as well as the Cisco Service Exchange backend. Anything you want to add, Ben?
Not to that. You've got that covered very well, and giving this audience a really good forward-looking peek into what is coming down the pipe. If you want to pass me the ball, I'm going to go over some Cisco Threat Response concepts and terminology, because there is a little bit of a new taxonomy that Cisco Threat Response uses, and I know there have been some questions about that. And this is as good a time as any to make sure that we get some clarity around some of these things. So common Cisco Threat Response concepts and terms that we are going to go over are modules, observables, the Investigate UI itself, judgments, verdicts, sightings, indicators, targets, snapshots, and casebooks. Each one of these is a term that has a specific meaning in threat response and generally also in the industry at large. And so we're going to go over this so that you can speak to your customers and to your contacts about Cisco Threat Response using the same terminology that they're going to see in the interface. Modules is fairly straightforward. These are just the plug-in technologies that handle the integrated products. So you have a module shown for endpoints. There is a module for ThreatGrid. There is a module for VirusTotal. There's a module for Umbrella, and so on. And these are completely mix and matchable. The customer can put in whichever modules they have the associated licenses and products for. You can also have multiple modules for the same technology. So if for some reason you want to be able to pivot into both ThreatGrid North America and ThreatGrid Europe because you have accounts on each of those systems, you can simply configure 2 ThreatGrid modules, one for each of those. If you're an MSSP, you can configure multiple AMP for Endpoints modules, one per customer that is using AMP for Endpoints, and so on. Very plug and play, very mix and match. And it gives it that really modular, for lack of a better word, architecture that allows it to be incredibly flexible in meeting the needs of our different customers. Next thing up is observables. We refer to anything that can be seen essentially as an observable because it's literally observable. You can see these domain names in your logs. You can see IP addresses in your logs, file hashes, certificate numbers, email addresses, user account names, and so on, devices, and observables are kind of the building blocks that threat response transacts with and uses to construct this investigation. Every observable can have multiple dispositions. It can have no disposition at all. On the right side, you see a box that lists out some of the observables that can be searched for in Cisco Threat Response. So anytime you hear or see the word observable, just know that it means some network or user structure artifact or similar that has a specific identification, an IP address, identifying a machine, a domain name identifying temporarily that IP address, and so on. The Investigate UI is simply the main interface that you're generally using when you're in threat response. There are other UIs. You can search through the threat intelligence. There's like the user management UI and so on, but the Investigate UI is that main panel that everyone's familiar, or that main collection of panels that everyone's familiar with that has the relationship diagram and the lists or tiles of the individual observables, etc. That is called the Investigate UI. Judgments and verdicts are one of the points of confusion that comes up the most often. A judgment is a disposition, an opinion on an observable at a point in time, and is generally valid for an explicit span of time. So we see in the example graphic shown, the Umbrella module has given a malicious has made a judgment that the disposition of this domain is malicious. The reason is that the customer added it to their domain list. Here's the source was the Umbrella Enforcement API that provided that information to the Umbrella module. It's got severity and confidence ratings. It's got a TLP ranking, traffic light protocol, common terminology in SOCs. That refers to how broadly can this information be shared. I'm not going to get into deep levels of detail here, but AMBER simply means that you're allowed to share it within your organization and within certain other kinds of organizations, but not publicly. And expiration on this one is indefinite. The one below it expires in 2 months. Essentially, this is how long the source thinks that that disposition should be valid. Threat response treats all of these opinions from different sources as judgments. You can see in this graphic there were 103 of these opinions given by individual modules on the domain that is currently the observable in question. These can be related to indicators, which provides more information about why this disposition was given. For example, this domain may have been put on the ThreatGrid curated feed. If you look down a bit in the graphic, you can see that that's actually the case. This domain was on the ThreatGrid RAT DNS feed. That is an indicator that would give you some more context about what that means and why that's considered to be malicious. Like I said, they're given by the data source modules, and they're shown associated with those data source modules, including more information with the reason and that. A verdict is assigned by threat response. So judgments are assigned by the individual modules, and the verdict is assigned by threat response. And it is one of those judgments that is considered to be the most relevant at the moment. So in this case, the AMP Global Intel rendering of a malicious judgment on this domain, which never expires, is considered by threat response to have the most validity and the most weight, and it is selected as the verdict for that domain observable. There are different kinds of verdicts that outrank each other. So a clean verdict, I mean, this means that it's on a whitelist, it's been human curated and so on. That's going to outrank a malicious verdict, because that malicious verdict could be a false positive if something has been convicted as malicious by one of the modules that's been marked as clean by some other trusted module. And so we do some ranking on these judgments, obviously, to select which one is going to be the verdict. Judgments are individual opinions from the modules. Verdict is threat response, selecting one of those to be representative of the observable itself. A citing is a record of the appearance of that cyber observable at any given date and time. I saw this domain in my network on this date, time, seconds, stamp, in this time zone. These can also be optionally related to indicators, which tells you why it was observed and considered to be of note. So you have the sightings timeline in the Investigate UI, and all this is a histogram of those sightings. It shows you when the thing has been seen, and there's both local and global sightings timeline. Now, an indicator, often people think of indicators as just what we're calling observables. Here's a list of indicators. It's actually a list of IP addresses. I mean, it's not invalid, but also indicators can be much more detailed and complex than that. And in Cisco Threat Response, they typically are. So you see that under indicators, you're not going to see just an IP address or a domain or something. You're going to see why was this thing considered to be malicious. So ThreatGrid saw, this domain participating in Zeus network communications, or it's listed in a specific Trojan command and control list. That's an indicator in threat response terminology, is that kind of indicator, not just the list of IP addresses, but the behavior, the why is this thing seen to be malicious, as opposed to just, hey, here's a thing that is malicious. Okay, we use a large number of malware indicators from a number of different modules, a number of different technologies, I should say, that feed into the AMP Global Intelligence database. From ThreatGrid, we also include ThreatGrid behavior indicators in this, and a number of other sources. Now, a target is pretty straightforward. That's when a device or a user or an email address was targeted. As we bring in more and more technologies, the types of targets are going to change, and that list is going to grow. When this graphic was taken, you can see that this is the original icon for a target endpoint. These icons have all been changed now because we had to diversify to show what kind of target it is. Targets were originally from AMP for endpoints and were endpoints, or if the user had AMP Unity configured, they might have been firewalls or ESA, et cetera. Now we also have, thanks to Umbrella, we have target networks, because Umbrella will tell you that something in your network reached out, in this network specifically, reached out to the domain that you're looking up. With the ESA addition, we have target email addresses, because a malicious email was sent to the specific email address. And so a target can be identified by a combination of observables. In this case, it shows that on an endpoint, you get the MAC address, the IP, and the computer GUID, as well as the host name. On a network, you might get the CIDR for the network, as well as whatever the user has decided to call that network. The email address, obviously, you get the email address. Whenever you have a local siting, you're going to have a target. But this doesn't need a whole lot more explaining, because everyone kind of intuitively understands what a target is. The next thing I'm going to go over is snapshots and casebooks because those seem similar and occasionally are confused a bit by people who think that they're more similar than they actually are. So a snapshot is, as Nassif explained, literally a snapshot in time. This is what the investigation looked like at this point. And it contains the list of observables that were researched, as well as any additional observables that were returned in the process of enrichment. And it shows the dispositions and the relationships that existed at the moment that you hit the button for Take Snapshot. And that will be stored indefinitely in the system. It's a great way to keep records of the state of those relationships at different points as you go through the investigation. It doesn't allow you to do a whole lot with that information. It loads it into the investigation UI, and it shows you the relationships that were there. At the time, casebooks, more information here about snapshots, you can share them because there's a link that you can use to share them across your team. It's visible to other people in the same organization. And it's like I said, it's a good record keeping and communications tool. Casebooks offers a whole lot more functionality than snapshots, but in a different way. So Casebooks allows you to work your cases across different tools. Hopefully everyone has seen the Casebooks pop up in for endpoints and Threat Grid, and the Casebook-driven capabilities that have been added to the Threat Grid interface, where you can actually block a hash in for endpoints right in Threat Grid without having to leave that interface at all, and so on. It's API and data that is all stored in Cisco Threat Response, but made available to other participating products. The browser plugin allows you to have full casebook functionalities in your browser on any content that was rendered in the browser, including any web management interface for Cisco products, whether or not they're also officially supported by an integration. Any existing external threat intel sources, you go to the Talos blog, you hit the button for your plugin, it will search out all of the observables, provide them to you in a list, and you can transact with one or multiple of those at a time. It allows you to bring observables together in groups. That group is effectively the case. And at any time, you can go and investigate that case, and that will show you the current status of the relationships and the dispositions of that group of observables. Whereas a snapshot is a history of a point in time, nature of those relationships and dispositions, the casebook allows you to, at any time, get the current values and relationships for the set of observables that are in the case. The casebook will show you the dispositions without having to go into threat response if you're launching the tool from an integrated product or from the browser plugin. And you can then pivot off of each of those things and do the deep dives into other sources of information or take response actions as available. It allows you to also go from tool to tool with the same case showed in the casebook's pop-up in the corner of your screen. And you can add things to that casebook from for endpoints, and then go to Threat Grid and do some more research and find some more observables, drag them into the casebook in Threat Grid, and all these changes are reflected in the master copy of that casebook that lives in Cisco Threat Response. So in short, this is what Threat Response does. It reduces complexity across the growing incident response toolset. That is one of the main key point messages behind Cisco Threat Response and all of our conversations about it. We do this by marrying external threat intelligence to our internal log data, combining data from multiple Cisco and third-party sources. It's a single location for the most common IR tasks across multiple tools. Like I said, we are not going to replicate the entirety of every user interface for every integrated product. It is not a true single pane of glass in the common parlance, but it is a single location for those most time-sensitive tasks. We have use cases before, during, and after an attack. The Threat Hunting Workshop does a great job of showing how this technology can be used to hunt for threats, to investigate an ongoing attack, and to mitigate and prepare for future events after an attack. And it reduces the time that it takes to do all of those things. I've got a little bit of additional information here that I want to share with you as well. Some links and references. Here are the full list of geos currently for Threat Response. We've got the North American, European, and APJC instances of Threat Response available. Here are the links for browser extensions, this time with the correct links. We've got the Chrome link and the Firefox link, thanks to everybody who pointed that out in the previous slide. There is the public website, Cisco.com section on threat response. It's very simply cisco.com/go/threat response. We have dCloud labs set up for threat response in all of the dCloud geos. Simply search in the catalog for threat response, and you'll see at least 4 responses. One of them is threat response itself, and one each for ThreatGrid, Umbrella, and AMP. These are pre-populated with valid logins, so you don't need an account, or if you have one, you don't need to use your own account. Very handy for doing customer demos on sites. As long as they have access to dCloud and you have a dCloud account that you can use, this is a great way to show off threat response and the integrated technologies. We've got a list of curated Cisco Threat Response demo stories at cs.co/CTR demos. It's got a list of demos for both your own accounts using the AMP demo data as well as the data that's in dCloud. dCloud also has the demo data enabled, but it has access to lab-generated data as well. So there's a couple extra stories in dCloud that you won't get using just the AMP demo data. We have the Cisco Security section on GitHub, where you can see code that leverages the APIs for ThreatGrid and for endpoints and recently threat response. There's some great stories that can be told about what the threat response API can be used for. Personally, I'm using it to filter what I submit to ThreatGrid, because as you know, we license the submissions to ThreatGrid by file analysis count. And we don't want to have our customers, or maybe we do, but we don't want to have our customers actually wasting their file analysis on files that are already well known. But you can easily query threat response API to see if this file is known by the integrated, Cisco security ecosystem. And if it is, then you don't need to submit it to ThreatGrid necessarily. And at Cisco Live Barcelona, Nassif, who is our co-presenter here, and Martin Nystrom put together an excellent session all about Cisco Threat Response. It's BreakSec 2433. The recording is live. You can go to the CiscoLive.com website and click on on-demand content and search for that title and find it there. I recommend it. The videos I already went through in the previous slide, and that wraps up what we have today. Unless there's a lot of questions, we are finishing a little bit early. But once again, I want to thank you very much for everybody's interest in threat response and in the integrated Cisco security portfolio and architecture. I'm going to have a quick look at the Q&A channel. I'm going to turn the mic back over to Amit. Actually, before I do that, Nassif, did you have anything else that you wanted to ask? Or you wanted to add, sorry?
I think that module map that you created may be tremendous value to this audience. If you want to spend a few minutes, or I can spend a few minutes, but I think when you explain to them how these modules come together and what they provide the customer, they'll be able to articulate the upsell if the customer doesn't have the module.
Absolutely, I agree. I actually forgot that you hadn't done that. Let me grab that and walk through it, because it's something that appears to have been fairly useful. Just the demand of it is going to tell me that it's something that we need to spend more time on. So let me load it up here. All right, is everybody seeing this eye chart?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. All right, thanks for the reminder as well. This is a module map for Cisco Threat Response, showing what each module brings and what is required to get that module. It is available on Sales Connect. I don't have the link handy right now, but if you look at the Cisco Threat Response section of Sales Connect, this deck, it's a single slide deck, and it is available there. So we have modules, we have whether or not a license is required, and then we have the different things that can be provided by a module with details for each module if they meet that use case whatsoever, and how. So starting at the very top and just working our way through, Umbrella, probably the source of most of the module-related confusion. It's got 3 different APIs that are involved in the Umbrella module, and each of them are licensed differently. So we've got the Investigate API, which is provided by the Investigate add-on, which customers can purchase for any Umbrella package. Once they have that, They can then see dispositions, judgments, and verdicts on IPs and domains, and they can pivot through to Umbrella for additional references on IPs, URLs, file hashes, and domains. Below that, we have the enforcement API, which requires the platform level of licensing, and with that, they can block domains. That's the response action that Umbrella provides. It's via that enforcement API and the platform license that grants access to it. And then the reporting API requires the platform or insights license levels and gives you the ability to see local sightings. So when you're in threat response and you see that one of your, a system in one of your networks looked up the DNS resolution for a domain, this is the part of the module that provides that. Now, it is possible to configure the Umbrella module without all three of these. You can kind of mix and match them as you need to within Umbrella, depending on what your customer has. So just because they don't have all three of these doesn't mean that they can't use Umbrella. It just means that they can't use Umbrella to do the specific parts that one API provided. So for example, you can get local context and global threat intelligence without having the reporting API, without having the enforcement API and being able to block domains, or you can get your reporting API and your enforcement API together, but you don't have the investigate add-on. Then that just means that you're going to see local sightings of domains and be able to block domains, but you're not going to get that global threat intelligence on those domains. So that is the most complex one. Underneath that, we have AMP for endpoints, which does require a license. It allows you to get local sightings of IPs, URLs, file hashes, and domains. It allows you to block files, and it allows you to pivot out for more information on IPs, URLs, file hashes, and domains. AMP Global Intelligence is one of the free default modules, and it allows you to get local sightings, it allows you to get dispositions, judgments, and verdicts on the IPs, URLs, file hashes, and domains that you have included in your investigation. I need to fix the slide, my apologies. AMP File Reputation doesn't require a license, and it allows you to get dispositions, judgments, and verdicts specifically on file hashes. We've got 3 AMP modules in a row here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the differences between them because it is a common question. AMP for endpoints is what gives you the local visibility and local control into what files have you seen and what files maybe do you need to block, what IPs have been seen on your endpoints, what URLs and domains have been seen. This is all, as the customer, this is all your stuff. This is all customer data and customer enforcement. It gives you some global context, but the primary value that this brings is the local context and the enforcement. The AMP Global Intelligence database is not AMP for endpoints. It is used in the AMP for endpoints, offering it as a collection of threat intelligence gathered from multiple sources, including some from AMP, some from ThreatGrid, some from open source third-party tools, abuse.ch, for example. There's a number of open source tools that are brought into this unified collection, as well as Cisco proprietary technologies like ThreatGrid and AMP itself. But it's not your local information. It offers you no response capabilities. It's global context. AMP File Reputation is the literal database that is behind all of the hash-based lookups that happen in AMP. That is that specific database. We do not add third-party intelligence to that. It is all generated by people's usage of AMP for endpoints, but it's provided separately because it's one of the default modules that's included, even if the user doesn't have AMP for endpoints, and it likewise, they get access to AMP File Reputation and AMP Global Intelligence. So even your maybe Umbrella-only customers, or in future your ESA-only customers that are using threat response, they get the benefit of AMP for endpoints global deployment because they get access to the file reputation database that is created in the process of people using AMP for endpoints. People often ask, why are those 3 separate things? I hope that has explained it. They're 3 separate things for some very good reasons. ThreatGrid, the ThreatGrid module, it does require the ThreatGrid cloud licensing and allows you to pivot out for reference on IP, URL, file hash, and domains and get more information about any of those. You can look them up in ThreatGrid and see more detail about what samples have reached out. Now, you'll often see in judgments, you'll see this was on this ThreatGrid list, this was on that ThreatGrid list. That's all collected into AMP Global Intelligence. That's all the AMP Global Intelligence module providing that ThreatGrid information. So again, users that don't have a ThreatGrid licensing still get some of the benefits of ThreatGrid's global reach by virtue of the fact that that information, the curated feeds, is included in the AMP Global Intelligence database and therefore in the AMP Global Intelligence module. All right. The ThreatGrid integration with Threat Response is going to be revisited. It wasn't in the roadmap section because it doesn't have firm dates around it yet, but it is going to be revisited, and we are going to be looking at additional benefits that ThreatGrid module could bring into your threat response investigation. Talos Threat Intelligence is one of the default modules. No license is required, and it gives you dispositions, judgments, and verdicts. It gives you global threat intelligence on your IPs, URLs, file hashes, and domains. People ask, well, it's Talos, that's Cisco. Why isn't that included in AMP Global Intelligence? Well, AMP Global Intelligence is a large repository of multiple sources. Talos Threat Intelligence is all the stuff that's high quality, low false positive, generated by our incredibly talented Talos Threat Intelligence research team, and it's kept separate for that reason. There is occasionally this opinion that all threat intelligence is the same and should all be lumped in together. And having worked in this industry for 20 years, I can definitely tell you that that is in no way the case. And there is value in keeping things separate and being able to transact differently with different sources of threat intelligence. Below that, VirusTotal. VirusTotal is a third-party tool. This is where we show the integration capabilities with third-party APIs. Cisco has no official relationship with VirusTotal, at least not as pertains to threat response and not in any way that I am aware of. But we do have a VirusTotal module. You do require a license to use VirusTotal, but that license is free. If you go to virustotal.com and ask for one, they will just give you one. It's an automated process. You provide an email, it emails you, you confirm it, everybody knows the drill, you get a license. You can then put that API key into your VirusTotal module in Threat Response, and Threat Response will then use VirusTotal's open API and your credentials on your behalf to bring VirusTotal results into any investigation that you are performing. This works for IPs, URLs, file hashes, and domains, and obviously the only use case that is fulfilled here is the global threat intelligence, the ability to get dispositions, judgments, and perhaps verdicts. NGFW has a little asterisk because that one's in progress. A license is definitely required for that, and what that's going to give you is the ability for incidents to be created in the Threat Response Incident Manager out of your NGFW IPS events. Nassif talked about this quite a bit in his demo, showed you the Cisco Services Exchange and device management and all that. That's what this is. And when that is available publicly, then our users will be able to get IPS alerts automatically popping up after they make it through a series of filters in Threat Response, so they can easily then use that information and start an investigation right in Threat Response where they already are. And the SMA, CES, ESA integration for email is also in progress, much closer to being finished than the NGFW one. A license is obviously required for that as well. It allows you to get local sightings on your email sender, email subject, message ID, attachment file names, and if you have AMP licensing for your email products, attachment file hashes as well. Well, that's a lot of information in a hurry. It's, like I said, a bit of an eye chart of a slide, but it's an at-a-glance way to get answers to the most common questions about modules as they pertain to licensing and which features on which kinds of observables do they offer. I have the one thing in the slide that I have to fix. I'll have a new version up on Sales Connect shortly. Are there any questions in the queue about that? I see a number of questions. Thanks to everybody who is answering those questions. I'm just scrolling through here. Okay, the questions that I'm seeing have largely been answered. Thank you very much, folks, for handling these. Okay, and that is the end of the module map, the module matrix that we wanted to talk about here. I don't think I've got anything else that needs to be covered at the moment. I know that we're still a little bit early, and I'm just trying to think of the conversations that I've had most often, but we've covered pretty much all of it.
Yeah, I think you did, Ben. I think you did a great job. Thank you. Someone asked a question about the SIM relevance, and I want to make sure that, because that's a common question we get. Let me just see if I can go up there. I think it was Thorsten. Threat response should simplify the threat response process for customers. So customers are able to do that, to do threat response without the need to install a SIM or SOA environment. That's up to the customer and the size of their SOC. As we've interviewed customers, we've been to Fortune 50 and we've been to customers that have one person running IT, and they've got various tools. But it just depends what they need. But we never have said that threat response is a SIM replacement. It's rather a SIM helper to be able to get to speed. If you look at the SIM in terms of the sense of a bunch of needles in a needle stack, when we add threat response to it, it just goes so much faster. And I'm going to do a demo here. Ben, if you can just share, make me present here. I want to show what I mean by that. By accelerating the incident response, even if you've got ArcSight, Splunk, or anything like that of that nature. If I go over here. So here I'm inside a Splunk. I'm inside a Splunk environment. This is not a Cisco alert. This alert that you see right now on the screen, Ben, can you see my screen?
Yes.
This alert actually came from FortiGate. This is a FortiGate firewall event. Now, in a SOC, you folks can imagine these analysts are probably going to look at these IPs and figuring out that's a host name, that's a domain, and trying to figure out what to do next. There's a URL with a file name attached to it. What we mean by a SIM helper and accelerating everything that a SIM does is the first thing we're going to do, if there was a ton of this on the screen, through our extensions and our APIs, we're going to give them real-time disposition of what they're looking at. So if there were 100 IPs and we had a varying malicious, suspicious unknowns, we would flag that immediately. We would also extract domains, things like that from there. So that's something that they did not have to go and do manually. The next thing that they're able to do is we treat this as data. Can we turn this data into knowledge? And knowledge means let's see if we can act on something and how fast can we act on it. Through this integration, and we always say the browser extension is really showcasing the APIs. Okay, through the ability to simply just click investigate now. That's my second click that I've made. If I pick up targets here, I have a much better picture than I had without threat response. So within a few seconds, I identified that a Skywalker is involved. I identified that I got a building HVAC system involved. And as I dig deeper in, I did not know about this file hash a few seconds ago. So you went from a FortiGate alert that had nothing about files, but again, if you had the power of AMP on the desktop or in the environment, you're able to get to file attribution as to who opened that connection involving that. So we don't want to be a SIM replacement. We want to be a SIM helper. And if they want to be able to use our intel to figure out what to do next inside their SIM, that's something that the partners will be looking at. I've got a partner right now that is looking to overlay the Cisco Threat Response plugin into Splunk so that when they see IPs that are malicious or suspicious, they're looking just to color code their logs. And they're going to do that by calling on threat response to figure out what the real-time disposition is so that their analysts can look at something. Was there anything else we needed to pass on as knowledge transfer, Ben, Evan, anyone else on the line here? I think that was about it. The bidirectional functionality of it. Threat response, let me just go back to something outside of threat response. If I were to go to this particular sample in ThreatGrid, because there's bidirectional functionality, I can complete the loop by decorating samples inside ThreatGrid. I can figure out that this is the host name that's so it, and I can go back and forth. So we do want to touch on that ability. And then that's about it that I have, Ben. I don't have anything else.
while you've got the ball, do you want to do a quick browser plugin demo?
Yeah. Which one particularly are you thinking?
Well, you're just the one you've got right now showing on the screen.
Sure. So if I wanted to, let me just pull this out.
Just like go to the Talos blog or something.
Okay. So if I go to Talos blog, let me see, I got Talos up here somewhere. Over here. I think that's what they saw earlier, just looking at these things here, grabbing this and getting the real-time disposition of this. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what he's showing is that you can select any block of text in any browser content, and you get this pop-up, this casebook functionality right there in the browser, no matter where you are. Now, obviously, this is useful for the Talos blog, and obviously this is useful for any other source of threat intelligence, but I also want you to think back to a minute ago when he was in Splunk in the browser with this plugin existing in his browser. This allows you to take threat response actions and bring threat response functionality into any web accessible content, including web management tools for third-party security and networking products. Every web manageable security tool integrates with threat response. It's kind of hacky. It's not an officially, bidirectionally supported integration, but it is an integration and it does work.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And if you've got the response capability, they don't have to pivot to threat response to go do the block domain. Because your API credential has response to be able to do block, we've got customers that are issuing their blocks directly from Splunk, from whatever they're working on, without leaving that current console, but they're affecting the umbrella block or they're affecting the AMP block to do that.
Right, exactly. So this is very powerful messaging. The same way that I was saying earlier that you can block a file and AMP for endpoints from ThreatGrid without having to leave ThreatGrid, that's true. You can also do that from the web-based management consoles of Symantec Endpoint Protection, for example. You can do that from the web-based management consoles of anything whatsoever. You can jump from Phantom Cyber or Demisto into being able to block a file or a domain without even actually having to do the jump. You simply pivot with this plugin and enact that response action without having to go into the interface of the tool that does so.
All right. I think that should be about our knowledge transfer, Ben.
I just want to add one more point on Torsten's excellent question about whether or not a SIEM and a SOAR are required anymore. Most people on the call will remember a time when we said AMP is not an antivirus engine. It can live next to antivirus products, but it does not replace antivirus products. It's another layer of defense. Anybody remember that? Because I sure do. And then we changed our story. And now we say that, yes, this can be used as a complete antivirus solution in addition to all the other kinds of protection that it offers. Well, threat response is not a SIEM. Threat response is not a SOAR. Threat response offers some SIEM and SOAR functionalities. If we tried to position this in the market as a SIEM or a SOAR or both, it would not go well because we don't offer a lot of the features that either one of those two things do. We're one of the only solutions that offers features of both of those. And in my humble opinion, we do so better than anything else that's on the market right now. But if we try to go head-to-head against a full-fledged SIEM or SOAR, that's not what CTR's use case currently is. Like AMP, the future could change that. But right now, we're not trying to displace every SIEM and every SOAR with threat response. We're using threat response to increase the utility that customers are getting out of their existing Cisco security investments. That's really the use case story. We're accelerating the SOC by making our Cisco products and technologies work better together for both incident response and investigation and threat hunting and remediation. So hopefully that provides the insight that PM wants us to take in regards to that question. Okay.
I think that's a wrap for us. If you want to close it out for us.
Nassif, do you want to pass the ball back to Amit, and he will wrap us up for the day?
Sure.
All right. Thank you so much. So, dear participants, thank you for attending this session. This session was hosted by Learning Services, your trusted learning partner. If you wish to engage our service or want more information, please contact us at ls-engage@cisco.com. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great day ahead. Bye-bye.